In an age of endless notifications, fragmented attention, and digital chaos, the answer to our modern crisis may lie hidden in the stone walls of medieval monasteries, the illuminated manuscripts of forgotten scribes, and the daily rhythms of people who lived centuries before the internet was even imaginable. This is the medieval art of focus. I'm about to share with you something remarkable. The medieval world, often dismissed as dark and backward, possessed secrets of concentration and deep work that we've almost entirely forgotten. Secrets that could transform how you work, think, and create in our fractured modern age. Over the next 10 chapters, we'll journey together into the mindset of medieval masters. You'll discover techniques used by monks, craftsmen, scholars, and artists who achieved extraordinary focus without any of our modern productivity tools. In fact, they might argue because they lacked them. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Chapter 1: The Monastery Bell. Why medieval minds were built for focus. Picture this. It's 4 in the morning in a Benedictine monastery. Sometime in the year 1250, a single bell cuts through the darkness. Within moments, dozens of monks rise from their simple beds, not grudgingly, but with purpose. No alarm snoozing, no checking messages, just immediate, directed action. This wasn't discipline born of punishment. This was architecture for the mind. Medieval society structured time in ways we've completely abandoned, and in that abandonment, we've lost something profound. The medieval day wasn't measured by hours and minutes in our modern sense. It was measured by purpose, by the canonical hours, by the rhythm of work and prayer, creation and contemplation. The monasteries operated on what they called the liturgy of the hours, 8 specific times each day, when bells would ring, calling the community to prayer. Matins in the deep night, lauds at dawn, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and finally compline before sleep. Each transition was marked, honored, given weight. Why does this matter for your focus? Because the medieval mind understood something we've forgotten. Transition is sacred. Every shift from one task to another was marked by ritual. The bell didn't just signal time, it signaled intention. It created a psychological boundary between one mode of being and another. Compare this to your typical day. You move from email to meetings, to creative work to administrative tasks, without any transition whatsoever. Your brain is expected to shift gears instantly, repeatedly, all day long. It's the cognitive equivalent of driving a car and shifting violently between first and fifth gear hundreds of times. Eventually, the transmission fails. Medieval craftsmen understood this intimately. A blacksmith didn't just start hammering iron. There was the ritual of starting the forge, of preparing tools, of entering the proper state of mind. A scribe didn't simply sit down and start copying manuscripts. There was the preparation of ink, the sharpening of quills, the saying of a prayer for steady hands and clear eyes. These weren't superstitions. They were transition rituals, psychological bridges that prepared the mind for deep focus. Modern neuroscience has now confirmed what medieval practitioners knew intuitively. The brain needs clear boundaries between different types of cognitive work. What researchers call task-switching cost was something a 13th century monk could have explained perfectly, though he'd use different language. He might say, "You cannot serve 2 masters." He might quote the rule of Saint Benedict, "Idleness is the enemy of the soul." Therefore, the brethren should be occupied at stated times. Stated times, not constant multitasking. Not checking your phone between hammer strikes. Stated, singular, bounded times. The medieval approach to focus began with a revolutionary idea. That time itself could be structured to serve concentration, rather than fragment it. In their world, the bell that rang wasn't an interruption. It was a container. It held space for one thing, completely, before releasing you to the next. Think about your own life. When was the last time you gave yourself a bell, a clear signal that said, "Now this begins, now this ends"? Not the chaotic bleeding of one task into another, not the half attention we give to everything simultaneously, but a true beginning and a true ending. The medieval masters would look at our modern workday with something approaching horror. We've created an environment where focus is nearly impossible. Then we blame ourselves for lacking discipline. We've removed all the structures that make concentration possible, then wonder why we can't concentrate. But here's the beautiful truth. Those structures can be rebuilt. Those bells can ring again, even in a modern life. You don't need a monastery. You don't need to abandon technology entirely. You need only to understand the principles that made medieval focus so powerful. And the first principle is this: focus is not a personal virtue you must somehow conjure through willpower alone. Focus is the natural result of proper structure. The monks knew this. The craftsmen knew this. The scholars copying precious texts by candlelight knew this. They built their days around the assumption that the human mind thrives on rhythm, on boundaries, on sacred transitions between states of being. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore exactly how they did this and how you can apply these ancient techniques to your chaotic modern existence. But first, you must accept this fundamental truth. You are not broken because you struggle to focus. Your environment is broken. The medieval world wasn't perfect, but in the art of sustained attention, in the craft of deep work, they were masters, and their secrets are waiting for you. Chapter 2, the scriptorium. Single tasking as sacred practice. In a scriptorium, the writing room of a medieval monastery, silence reigned. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, of complete, total absorption in one singular task. A monk might spend an entire day writing a single page of manuscript. One page. In an era where we send dozens of emails before breakfast, this seems almost impossible to fathom. Wasteful, even inefficient. But here's what that monk understood that we've forgotten. There is profound efficiency in doing one thing completely. The rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century, contained an instruction that would revolutionize how we think about work. Let all things be done with moderation and in their proper time. Not faster, not simultaneously. In their proper time. Medieval scribes didn't have the option of multitasking. They had one piece of vellum, expensive, precious, made from animal skin that took weeks to prepare. One quill, one pot of ink mixed that very morning, one candle or window providing light. To ruin the page through distraction wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a material disaster. So they developed something we desperately need today: the ability to give themselves completely to the task at hand. Watch a medieval illuminator at work. If you could step back through time, every movement is deliberate. The grinding of pigments, the mixing of gold leaf with egg white and honey, the careful application of paint with a brush made from squirrel hair. Each step receives full attention before moving to the next. There's no background music, no podcast playing in their ear, no notifications buzzing in their pocket. Just the work, witnessed fully, performed completely. Modern productivity culture has sold us a devastating lie: that we can do more by doing multiple things at once. Research from Stanford University has thoroughly demolished this myth. What we call multitasking is actually rapid task switching, and it comes at an enormous cognitive cost. Every switch incurs what psychologists call attention residue. Your mind doesn't fully release the previous task when you jump to something new. A medieval scribe never experienced attention residue because they never switched. This wasn't just about efficiency. It was about reverence. In the medieval worldview, work itself was a form of prayer. Laborare est orare, they said. To work is to pray. How you did something mattered as much as what you did. Sloppy, distracted work was seen as a form of disrespect to the craft, to the community, to God. The modern equivalent might be, distracted work is disrespect to your own potential. Consider the illuminated manuscripts that survive from this era. The Book of Kells, the Lindisfarne Gospels. These weren't created by people frantically multitasking, trying to maximize output. They were created by individuals who understood that true mastery emerges from sustained, singular focus. A single page of the Book of Kells contains intricate detail, so fine that scholars believe the illuminator must have used a magnifying stone. Some patterns repeat with such precision that they appear mechanical, yet they were done entirely by hand. How? Through focus so complete that the hand became an extension of pure intention. You possess this same capacity. Right now, the human brain hasn't changed significantly in 1,000 years. What's changed is the environment we've built around that brain. Medieval single-tasking wasn't about having superhuman discipline. It was about creating conditions where divided attention was simply impossible. The scriptorium had no phones, no internet, no colleague stopping by for just a quick question. The architecture itself enforced focus, but even more than physical architecture, there was mental architecture. The monk at his writing desk understood his task as bounded. It had a clear beginning, the preparation of materials. It had a clear middle, the actual work. It had a clear ending, the cleaning of tools and offering of the completed work. Within these boundaries, the mind could settle, could sink deep into the task, could enter what modern psychologists call flow state. But medieval practitioners might have called simple obedience to the work at hand. Here's the practice you can extract from this. Choose one task today and give it the scriptorium treatment. Before you begin, prepare everything you need. Remove everything you don't. Acknowledge the beginning with a simple ritual, perhaps 3 deep breaths. Then work until the task reaches its natural completion point. No checking email mid-task. No quick social media breaks. No having 2 browser windows open, just in case. One task, completely. Like your vellum is precious and irreplaceable, because, in truth, your time is. Chapter 3. The Craftsman's Hands. Muscle memory and the path to mastery. In medieval Paris, if you wanted to become a master craftsman, you didn't take a weekend workshop. You didn't watch tutorial videos. You became an apprentice, and you spent years doing the simplest, most repetitive tasks imaginable. A young apprentice to a stonemason might spend his first entire year just learning to hold the chisel correctly, to feel the grain of the stone, to understand through his hands what his eyes couldn't yet see. This seems absurd to our modern minds, trained to seek efficiency and immediate results. Surely there's a faster way. But the medieval masters understood something profound about focus. The body knows things the mind cannot grasp through thinking alone. Watch a master carpenter from the 14th century plane a piece of wood. His hands move with a certainty that appears effortless. The blade takes exactly the right amount of material with each pass. His body has performed this motion 10,000 times, maybe 100,000. The technique has moved from conscious thought into what we now call muscle memory, but what medieval practitioners might have called the wisdom of the hands. This is focus of a different order than mental concentration. This is focus that has become embodied. Modern neuroscience has discovered something remarkable. When you repeat an action enough times with full attention, your brain literally rewires itself. Neural pathways strengthen. The action moves from requiring prefrontal cortex activation, conscious, effortful control, to being handled by the basal ganglia and cerebellum. What once required intense focus becomes automatic, freeing your conscious mind for higher-level awareness. A medieval blacksmith at his forge isn't thinking about how to swing the hammer. That knowledge lives in his shoulders, his wrists, his core. His conscious mind is free to consider the larger form he's creating, to notice the subtle color changes in the heating metal, to make micro-adjustments, based on feel rather than thought. This is mastery, and it's built through repetition, so complete that focus becomes involuntary. The medieval guild system was designed around this understanding. You couldn't rush mastery. The 7-year apprenticeship wasn't arbitrary. It was the minimum time required for skills to move from conscious effort into embodied knowledge. An apprentice shoemaker would cut thousands of leather pieces before being allowed to stitch a complete shoe. A jeweler's apprentice might spend months just learning to hold the tools, years practicing basic techniques on cheap materials before touching anything precious. We've lost patience for this process. We want mastery now, immediately, with minimal investment. But the brain doesn't work that way. Deep focus, the kind that produces extraordinary work, requires time for neural pathways to solidify. Here's what's beautiful about this. Once established, these pathways last. A master craftsman who hadn't touched his tools in years could return to the work and find his hands remembered. The focus was stored not just in his mind, but in the very structure of his nervous system. Think about areas of your own life where you've developed this embodied focus. Perhaps typing. Your fingers find keys without conscious thought. Perhaps driving. Your foot adjusts pressure on the pedal automatically. Perhaps cooking a familiar recipe. Your hands know the motions, while your mind wanders freely. These are moments when focus has become so complete it's invisible. You're not trying to concentrate. You're simply doing what your body has learned to do. The medieval approach to mastery was built on a simple principle. Respect the time it takes. Don't rush the learning. Don't skip the fundamentals. Don't seek shortcuts around the repetition that builds deep competence. A master glassblower couldn't explain in words exactly how he knew the precise moment to shape the molten glass. He just knew, through hundreds of failures and successes, through countless hours at the furnace, through focus repeated so many times it became instinct. This has profound implications for focus in modern life. We often struggle to concentrate because we're constantly working at the edge of our competence. In the zone of maximum conscious effort, everything requires intense mental energy because nothing has become automatic. The medieval craftsman did struggle at first, but he struggled through the same basic motions until they became effortless. Then he could bring his full conscious focus to the creative, complex, novel aspects of the work. You can apply this principle today. Instead of constantly switching between different types of tasks and never building deep competence in any, choose core skills worth mastering. Then practice them with the patience of a medieval apprentice. Not for a weekend, not for a month, but until your hands know what your mind once had to consciously direct. Write the same type of document enough times, and the structure becomes automatic. Code the same patterns enough times, and your fingers flow across the keyboard. Teach the same concept enough times, and the words arise without effort. This is not mindless repetition. This is mindful repetition. Full attention given to each iteration until the skill moves from conscious to unconscious competence. The medieval masters knew, once your body holds the technique, your mind is free for artistry. That's where true focus becomes possible, not in the struggle of learning, but in the flow of mastery. Chapter 4. The Cathedral Builders. Vision beyond your lifetime. In 1248, construction began on Cologne Cathedral in Germany. The builders who laid the foundation stones knew something with absolute certainty. They would never see the finished building. Neither would their children, nor their grandchildren. The cathedral wouldn't be completed until 1880, more than 600 years later. Yet they worked with extraordinary focus and precision. Every stone perfectly cut, every measurement exact, every detail refined, as if the completion ceremony would happen tomorrow. This is perhaps the most alien concept for our modern minds. Focused work toward a goal you'll never personally witness. The master mason who designed Cologne Cathedral created plans, knowing that dozens of generations of craftsmen would need to interpret them. He built focus not just for himself, but for people who wouldn't be born for centuries. His concentration had to project forward through time. Medieval cathedral building reveals something crucial about focus. It isn't just about the present moment. Deep focus includes the ability to hold a distant vision clearly enough that it guides today's actions. Modern productivity culture tells us to focus on quarterly results, weekly goals, daily tasks. Everything must show immediate returns. But the cathedral builders operated on a completely different timescale. They had to maintain concentration on something that transcended individual benefit. Why would a stonemason care about the perfect placement of a stone that would be hidden inside a wall, never seen by human eyes again? Because the work itself demanded it. Because the vision was larger than personal reward. This wasn't naive idealism. It was practical necessity. A cathedral built carelessly, focused only on speed and immediate results, would collapse within years. Only sustained focus across generations could create something meant to stand for millennia. The medieval mind understood hierarchy of timescales. There was the immediate focus of the present task, carving this stone, mixing this mortar. There was medium-term focus, completing this arch, this wall section. And there was the ultimate focus, the completed cathedral, soaring toward heaven, that great-great-grandchildren might worship in. All three levels of focus existed simultaneously in the mind of a medieval craftsman. The hammer stroke right now, the section due this season, the sacred building that justified the entire enterprise. We've collapsed these timescales into one. Everything is now immediate, urgent. We've lost the ability to focus on something we won't personally benefit from. But consider what this costs us. The medieval cathedral builder experienced a different kind of motivation. He wasn't working for a bonus or promotion. He was participating in something transcendent. His focus came not from personal ambition, but from being part of a story much larger than himself. Modern research on motivation confirms what medieval builders intuited. People work with greatest focus and satisfaction when connected to purpose beyond themselves. It's called prosocial motivation, the drive to benefit others, to contribute to something meaningful. A cathedral builder in 1350 had perfect prosocial motivation. Every stone he placed was a gift to the future. Every hour of concentrated work was an offering to a community that would exist long after his death. This created a particular quality of focus, patient, thorough, meticulous. There was no point in cutting corners. There was no pressure to ship before ready. The timeline was generations, so today's work could be done completely, correctly, with the full attention it deserved. Compare this to modern project management. Ship fast, iterate. Fix problems later. Move quickly, break things. Minimum viable product. These philosophies have value in certain contexts, but they've also trained us out of the kind of patient, thorough focus the cathedral builders embodied. What would it mean to approach your work like building a cathedral? First, it would mean acknowledging that some things worth creating cannot be rushed. That focus is not just about intensity, but about duration, about showing up consistently, day after day, year after year, trusting that sustained attention compounds into something remarkable. Second, it would mean releasing attachment to immediate results. The cathedral builder's satisfaction came from the work itself, from the craft, from knowing he'd contributed his part, not from seeing the grand opening. Third, it would mean holding multiple timescales simultaneously. Yes, focus on the task at hand, but also maintain awareness of how this task fits into larger patterns, longer arcs, visions that extend beyond your personal timeline. A medieval scribe might spend 30 years copying manuscripts. A glassmaker might spend 40 years perfecting his craft. A cathedral sculptor might work his entire adult life on decorations for a building that wouldn't be finished in his lifetime. They maintained focus not through discipline alone, but through connection to something lasting. Their work would outlive them. Their focus was a gift to the future. You may not be building cathedrals, but you're building something. Perhaps a body of work, perhaps a skill set, perhaps a contribution to your field, perhaps a family legacy. What if you focused on that work the way a medieval craftsman focused on his cathedral stone? Not frantically, not with desperate urgency, but with steady, patient, thorough attention, knowing you might not see the completion, trusting that the work itself is worthwhile, understanding that focus sustained over years creates something impossible to achieve through intense bursts alone. The cathedrals still stand. The hastily built structures of their era have long since crumbled. Slow focus, sustained focus, focus that outlasts you. This is the cathedral builder's gift to our frantic age. Chapter 5. The Enclosed Garden. Creating boundaries against chaos. In medieval manuscripts, you'll find images of a special place called the hortus conclusus, the enclosed garden. High walls surround a small paradise of flowers, fountains and fruit trees. The world outside might be chaotic, dangerous, unpredictable. But inside these walls, peace, order, cultivation. The enclosed garden wasn't just a pretty metaphor. It was a practical philosophy about focus. Medieval monasteries were built around this principle. Thick stone walls separated the sacred space within from the secular world without. This wasn't about escaping reality. Monks did hard physical labor, dealt with politics and economics, engaged with the wider world. But they understood something crucial. Focus requires boundaries. You cannot concentrate on everything simultaneously. You must choose what receives your attention and actively exclude everything else. The walls aren't there to imprison you. They're there to protect your capacity for deep work. Think about the medieval monastery garden. Inside, herbs for medicine, vegetables for meals, flowers for beauty, paths for contemplative walking. Everything intentionally chosen, carefully tended. Outside the walls, wilderness, danger, distraction, the demands of a chaotic world. The monk cultivating his garden wasn't ignoring the outside world. He was creating conditions where focused cultivation was possible, where something delicate and valuable could grow without being trampled by external chaos. Now consider your mental garden. What are you cultivating? What are your walls? Most of us have no walls at all. We've left our attention completely exposed. Email arrives unfiltered. Social media streams endlessly. News breaks constantly. Messages demand immediate response. We've created an environment where the chaotic outside world has unlimited access to our consciousness at every moment. A medieval monk would see this as madness, as violating the basic conditions required for focused thought. The modern open plan office, that supposed innovation, is the opposite of the enclosed garden. It removes all boundaries, all protection, all possibility of sustained concentration. Studies show that workers in open offices experience constant interruption, lower productivity, higher stress, and decreased job satisfaction. We built the opposite of what focus requires, then wondered why we can't concentrate. But here's the powerful part. You can build walls. You can create your own enclosed garden, even in modern chaos. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit. Medieval monasteries had gates, controlled points of entry and exit. The walls weren't impermeable, they were intentional. They let in what served the purpose, kept out what didn't. Your digital boundaries work the same way. Turn off notifications, all of them except the truly essential. Create specific times for checking email, rather than leaving it open all day. Use website blockers during focus periods. Put your phone in another room. These aren't restrictions. They're walls that protect your garden. Physical boundaries matter too. The medieval study or scriptorium was a dedicated space. You didn't eat there, socialize there, or sleep there. It was for one purpose, focused work. The environment itself signaled to your mind, here, we concentrate. Can you create a dedicated focus space, even a corner of a room, arranged specifically for deep work? The medieval monk's cell was often tiny, just enough space for a desk, a stool, a shelf for books. But it was his, dedicated to contemplation and study. Temporal boundaries are equally important. The canonical hours created clear containers for different types of activity. You didn't pray during work time or work during prayer time. Each activity had its protected space in the daily rhythm. What if you created the same clarity? Not the rigid 8 times daily of monastic practice, but simple boundaries. Focus time, completely protected, no meetings, no interruptions, ideally the same time each day. Communication time, when you're available and responsive. Administrative time for the necessary small tasks. Clear containers. Protected boundaries. The enclosed garden principle applied to your day. Medieval gardens also teach us about what to include inside the walls. Not everything. That's the chaos you're trying to escape. But a careful selection of what serves your purpose. The monastic garden had medicinal herbs, because health mattered. Vegetables because the body needed nourishment. Flowers because beauty fed the soul. Walking paths because the mind needed gentle movement. Similarly, your focus environment should include what genuinely supports your work. Perhaps music, if it helps you concentrate. Perhaps silence, if that serves better. Perhaps particular tools arranged within easy reach. Perhaps a window with natural light. Perhaps a candle or plant that creates a sense of calm. But not the 100 distracting things we typically surround ourselves with. Not the smartphone calling for attention. Not the multiple monitors with different stimuli competing for awareness. Not the clutter that fragments visual focus. The enclosed garden is radically simple. Everything inside serves the purpose. Everything else stays outside. There's one more layer to this medieval wisdom. Boundaries must be defended. Walls require maintenance. Gates must be tended. A garden left unprotected will be quickly overrun. This means saying no, often. Medieval monks said no to visitors during certain hours. No to requests that conflicted with their purpose. No to opportunities that would fragment their focus. In our culture of constant availability, saying no feels radical, even rude. But it's essential. Every yes to distraction is a no to your deepest work. The enclosed garden isn't about isolation. It's about protection. Protection of the delicate, valuable, beautiful things that can only grow when defended against chaos. Your focus is one of those delicate, valuable things. Build your walls. Tend your garden. Let the chaos of the world rage outside. Inside your boundaries, something precious can flourish. Chapter 6, The Illuminated Margin. Finding clarity in constraint. Open an illuminated manuscript from the medieval period, and you'll notice something peculiar. The text fills most of the page, yes, but in the margins, you'll find extraordinary creativity. Tiny paintings, elaborate vines and flowers, sometimes whimsical creatures or scenes of daily life, sometimes sacred imagery or geometric patterns. These weren't mistakes or distractions. They were intentional, and they reveal something profound about focus. Constraint creates clarity. The medieval scribe faced severe limitations. Vellum was expensive. Every page represented significant cost. Space was precious. Every word had to be carefully considered before being committed to permanent ink. You couldn't just hit delete and retype. You couldn't print another draft. You had one page, finite space, irreversible marks. Modern writers can type 100,000 words, delete 90,000, and start again. It's effortless to be wasteful with words. when the medium is essentially unlimited. But the medieval scribe's constraint forced something valuable: absolute clarity about what mattered. Before touching quill to vellum, decisions had to be made. What text goes on this page? How should it be arranged? Where do sections begin and end? What deserves elaboration or illustration? These weren't casual choices. They were focus exercises. The medium itself demanded concentration. And here's the paradox. Those strict constraints didn't limit creativity, they channeled it. Within the bounded space of the margin, illuminators created some of the most imaginative artwork in human history. Dragons breathing fire, rabbits justing, monks harvesting crops, abstract patterns of stunning complexity. The constraint wasn't a limitation to overcome. It was a structure that enabled focused creativity. Think about modern creative work. We have essentially unlimited space. Digital documents expand infinitely. Cloud storage is vast. Platforms let us publish endlessly. So what do we create? Often bloated, unclear, unfocused work. We include everything because we can. We don't edit ruthlessly because there's no forcing function. The medieval scribe didn't have that luxury. Limited space meant every word earned its place. Constraint enforced quality. There's a modern movement that's rediscovered this ancient wisdom, the constraint of forms. Poets writing sonnets. Exactly 14 lines, specific rhyme scheme. Twitter users crafting messages in limited characters. 6-word memoirs. Haiku. These arbitrary limits don't restrict expression, they sharpen it. They force focus. They demand that every word carry weight. Medieval craftsmen understood this across disciplines. A sculptor working on a cathedral column had finite space, perhaps 12 inches wide, 6 feet tall. Within that constraint, he created a complete narrative in stone. The limitation wasn't frustrating, it was clarifying. It told him exactly what space he had to work with, forcing decisions about composition, detail, emphasis. A glassmaker designing a church window had the constraint of the window's shape and the limits of available glass colors. These boundaries didn't prevent masterpieces, they enabled them by providing structure. In modern life, we often think freedom means unlimited options. But research on decision-making shows the opposite. Too many choices create paralysis and dissatisfaction. We focus better when options are constrained. The medieval workshop operated on this principle. An apprentice wasn't given infinite freedom to experiment with any technique. He was given specific constraints. Use these tools, work with this material, follow these techniques. Within those boundaries, develop mastery. Later, having achieved deep competence within constraints, the journeyman gained more freedom. But freedom built on foundation, not freedom floating in overwhelming possibility. Consider how you might apply the illuminated margin principle to your own work. First, embrace artificial constraints. If you're writing, set a word limit before you begin. If you're coding, challenge yourself to solve the problem in the minimum lines possible. If you're designing, work within a strict grid system. Constraints focus attention wonderfully. Second, recognize that finished exists. Medieval work had clear endpoints. The manuscript was copied. The sculpture was complete. The window was installed. Modern digital work can be endlessly revised, never truly finished. This creates chronic dissatisfaction and prevents moving on to new focus. Set deadlines. Declare completion. Honor the constraint of finite time, even if your medium allows infinite revision. Third, find the margins. Within your constraints, where's the space for creativity? The medieval scribe had the margin for imaginative illustration. You have equivalent spaces, places where, within your primary structure, you can explore and play. Maybe it's the examples you use to illustrate technical concepts. Maybe it's the specific implementation within a required framework. Maybe it's the visual style within functional requirements. Find your margins and illuminate them. Fourth, Make constraint visible. The medieval scribe could literally see the edge of the page. Make your limits equally tangible. Put your word count target on the wall. Set a timer for your work session. Create physical representations of your boundaries. When constraint is invisible, it's easy to ignore. When it's present and obvious, it focuses the mind. The illuminated manuscript teaches us that limitation and creativity aren't opposites. They're partners. The structure focuses energy, channels attention, prevents the dissipation that comes from boundless possibility. A river without banks is a swamp. Water needs boundaries to flow powerfully in one direction. Your focus is the same. Give it banks. Accept constraints. Work within defined space, limited time, specific parameters. Then, within those margins, illuminate everything you touch. Chapter 7. The Pilgrim's Path. Movement as meditation. In the medieval world, if your mind was troubled, if focus eluded you, if you felt disconnected from purpose, there was a prescription walk. Not just any walk, a pilgrimage. A sacred journey on foot to a holy place, sometimes hundreds of miles distant. Canterbury, Santiago de Compostela, Jerusalem. These weren't vacations. They were focus exercises of the most profound kind. The medieval pilgrim understood something we've forgotten. Movement organizes the mind. Consider the rhythm of walking, step after step after step, hour after hour, day after day. There's something about sustained rhythmic movement that settles scattered thoughts, that brings what's chaotic into alignment. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what medieval pilgrims knew intuitively. Walking, particularly in nature, enhances cognitive function. It increases blood flow to the brain. It activates the default mode network, allowing unconscious processing of complex problems. It reduces cortisol and anxiety while increasing creative thinking. But medieval pilgrimage was more than just walking. It was walking with purpose, with direction, toward a specific destination. This gave the physical movement a psychological structure. Every step was progress. Every mile brought you closer. The journey had clear beginning, middle, and end. This narrative structure satisfied something deep in the human mind. We are creatures who understand ourselves through story, and a pilgrimage is story embodied. Think about how directionless modern life often feels. We're busy constantly, but toward what end? We take countless steps that feel like they're going nowhere. We lack the pilgrim's clarity. I am walking from here to there, and every step has meaning. The medieval pilgrim also understood the power of sustained focus. A pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela from Paris might take 3 months of walking, 3 months of one clear intention. Reach the destination. In our culture of instant gratification and constant task switching, we've lost appreciation for focus sustained over months. We want quick wins, immediate results, rapid transformation. But some of the most important cognitive work happens slowly, through sustained engagement. The pilgrim walking day after day enters a state of mobile meditation. The body's rhythm frees the mind to process, integrate, make connections that rushed thinking never achieves. Many pilgrims reported that their deepest insights came not at the sacred destination, but somewhere in the middle of the journey. During the long days of walking, when the body was occupied with simple forward movement, and the mind could wander freely within the container of the journey's purpose. This has practical application for modern focus challenges. When you're stuck on a problem, when concentration feels impossible, when you're churning mentally without progress, move. Not frantically. Not multitasking exercise with podcasts and emails, but simple, rhythmic, sustained movement. Walking is ideal, but any repetitive physical activity can work. Swimming, cycling, rowing. The key is consistency of rhythm and duration. Medieval pilgrims didn't sprint. They walked at a sustainable pace for hours. Modern research suggests that walks of at least 20 to 30 minutes provide cognitive benefits, with even greater effects from longer durations. There's another layer to the pilgrim's wisdom. Walking creates natural breaks for reflection. Medieval pilgrims walked in stages, stopping at monasteries or inns. Each stop was a point of integration, rest, food, conversation, recording thoughts in journals, or discussing the day with fellow travelers. The rhythm was sustained movement, then reflection, movement, then integration, forward progress, then consolidation. Compare this to modern productivity culture. Constant forward push with no time for reflection. We accumulate experience but don't process it. We consume information but don't integrate it. We're always moving, but rarely stopping to understand what the movement means. The pilgrim's pattern is healthier. Periods of focused effort alternating with periods of consolidation. This isn't inefficient. It's how human learning and creativity actually work. Many medieval thinkers did their best work while walking. St. Augustine famously paced while composing. Thomas Aquinas dictated his massive theological works while walking, with scribes struggling to keep up. The rhythm of walking somehow accessed thoughts that sitting couldn't reach. Contemporary creative workers have rediscovered this. Writers take long walks to work through plot problems. Programmers walk to debug mental code. Designers walk to find visual solutions. The pattern is ancient. Here's how to apply the pilgrim's focus technique. First, create walking space in your schedule. Not exercise for fitness, but walking for thinking. Regular walks without other input. No podcasts, no music, no phone calls. Just walking and the thoughts that arise. Second, use walking for specific focus challenges. When stuck on a problem, instead of forcing yourself to sit and struggle, walk it. Hold the problem lightly in your mind while your feet move. Often the solution arrives not through effort, but through the relaxed state walking creates. Third, honor the rhythm of movement and rest. Medieval pilgrims walked hard, then stopped completely. Modern culture promotes constant moderate effort, never fully engaged, never fully at rest. Try the opposite, periods of intense focus, followed by complete disengagement. Fourth, consider long-duration focus projects. The pilgrim's 3-month journey represents sustained attention on a scale we rarely attempt. What would it mean to commit 3 months to one significant project, walking toward it day by day, step by step? The medieval pilgrim faced hardship, blistered feet, bad weather, dangerous roads. But they also experienced something we've largely lost: the deep satisfaction of sustained movement toward a worthy goal. Your work can have this quality. Not every task, but the projects that matter most. Approach them like a pilgrimage. Set the destination, begin walking, trust the rhythm, honor the rest stops, and notice what clarity emerges when your feet find their rhythm and your mind is free to wander within purpose. Chapter 8: The Feast and the Fast. Rhythms of abundance and restraint. The medieval calendar was marked by feast and fast in strict alternation. Christmas feast, then Lenten fast. Easter celebration, then days of restraint. This wasn't random. It was sophisticated understanding of how humans maintain focus over long periods. You cannot operate at maximum intensity indefinitely. You also cannot remain in permanent relaxation. The rhythm between the two creates sustainable focus. Modern productivity culture has forgotten this ancient wisdom. We're told to be always on, perpetually available, constantly productive. Then we wonder why we burn out. The medieval approach was radically different. The feast day was genuine celebration. Work stopped. Food was abundant. Community gathered. But it was bounded, limited. Then came days of fasting and restraint, creating space for different kinds of focus. A feast without fast becomes meaningless indulgence. A fast without feast becomes joyless deprivation. The rhythm between them creates meaning. Think about your own relationship with focus and intensity? Do you have genuine feast periods, times when you celebrate, rest completely, engage fully with pleasure and community? Or do you maintain a constant moderate level of half working, half relaxing, never fully committing to either? Medieval monks worked hard during appropriate hours, but they also rested completely. Evening compline was followed by the great silence. No talking, no work, just sleep. The next day's focus depended on the previous night's rest. They understood what modern sleep research has confirmed. Focus is a limited resource that must be replenished. You can't withdraw from your attention bank indefinitely without depositing new resources. The feast and fast rhythm operated at multiple timescales: daily, work and rest; weekly, 6 days of labor, 1 of Sabbath; annually, liturgical seasons of intensity and retreat. Each rhythm reinforced the others, creating a sustainable pattern. You could focus intensely during work periods because rest periods were guaranteed. You could fast knowing a feast approached. Compare this to the modern pattern: chronic moderate stress with no clear boundaries, always somewhat working, never fully resting. The cortisol never drops completely. The nervous system stays in low-level activation constantly. This isn't sustainable. Medieval patterns were sustainable because they respected human biology. There's another dimension to feast and fast. It's about focus on different things in different seasons. During feast times, focus shifted to community, celebration, gratitude. During fast times, focus shifted to contemplation, discipline, inner work. Both were valuable. Both required focus, but they required different kinds of focus, and the alternation prevented either from becoming exhausting. In your work, can you identify different seasons requiring different focus? Perhaps there are creative seasons when you need to generate new ideas, and administrative seasons when you consolidate and organize. Perhaps intense project launches, followed by periods of learning and skill development. The mistake is trying to do everything simultaneously, all the time. Creative and administrative, generating and consolidating, learning and executing, all mixed together in undifferentiated days. Medieval wisdom says, separate them. Create seasons. During creative season, focus there completely. During administrative season, attend to that fully. The quality of focus increases when you're not trying to hold incompatible modes simultaneously. Fasting, specifically, taught focus through constraint. During Lent, meat was forbidden. Medieval cooks became incredibly creative with fish, vegetables, grains. Necessity drove culinary innovation. Constraint forced focus and ingenuity. In your work, periodic fasting from certain inputs can sharpen focus remarkably. Try a week without social media, a month without buying new books, a season without starting new projects. These constraints aren't punishments, they're focus tools. They force you to go deeper with what you have rather than constantly seeking new stimulation. Medieval feast days also teach us about celebration as focus. When the feast came, it wasn't distracted half enjoyment while thinking about work. It was full presence, complete engagement with celebration. How often do you truly celebrate completions? Or do you finish one thing and immediately start the next, never pausing to acknowledge achievement? The feast day says stop. Recognize what was accomplished. Celebrate with others. Let the satisfaction of completion fully register before moving forward. This isn't inefficient. It's essential. The brain needs closure, needs acknowledgement of completion. Without it, everything becomes an endless treadmill. Here's a practical application. Structure your work in cycles with clear feast and fast. Perhaps your cycle is weekly. 5 days of intense focus on your primary work. 1 day of learning and exploration. 1 day of complete rest. Perhaps it's quarterly. 2 months of intensive project work. 1 month of lighter load with time for strategic thinking and skill development. Perhaps it's daily, deep focus periods alternating with complete breaks. Rather than the chronic moderate engagement we often default to. The specific pattern matters less than honoring the rhythm, push and release, intensity and ease, feast and fast. Medieval practitioners could maintain focus for decades because they understood this. Sustainability comes through rhythm, not through constant grinding effort. Work like you'll feast, rest like you've fasted, and notice how the rhythm between them makes both more powerful. Chapter 9. The Master's Signature, Pride, Legacy, and Complete Work. On medieval artifacts that survive to this day, you'll sometimes find a tiny detail, the maker's mark, a stonemason's symbol carved discreetly on a cathedral column, a scribe's name, hidden in the decorative initial of a manuscript, a craftsman's signature on the bottom of a piece of furniture. These weren't signatures for payment or credit. Most medieval work was done anonymously, commissioned by guilds or the church. These marks meant something deeper. I made this, and I made it well. The medieval craftsman understood that every piece of work carried his reputation forward through time. Your work outlasts you. It speaks about who you were long after your voice is silent. This knowledge created a particular quality of focus, the absolute unwillingness to do shoddy work. There's a famous story about medieval cathedral builders. High up on the spires, on sections that would be invisible from the ground, that no human eye would ever see again, once construction was complete. The stone carving was just as detailed and precise as the work at eye level. Why? Because God could see it. Because the work itself deserved respect. Because cutting corners was unthinkable, even when no one would notice. This seems almost alien to modern thinking. We're trained to do the minimum viable, to ship before perfect, to iterate quickly. There's value in these approaches for certain contexts, but we've lost something important. We've lost the craftsman's pride that said, "My name is attached to this, even if invisibly. This represents me. It must be excellent." Medieval guild systems formalized this principle. Before a craftsman could become a master, he had to create a masterpiece, a piece of work so excellent it demonstrated complete mastery of the craft. This wasn't just about skill. It was about focus sustained until the work was truly complete, truly worthy. A journeyman metalworker might spend months on his masterpiece, every detail perfect, every technique demonstrated, nothing rushed or compromised. His entire future depended on the quality of this one focused effort. Today, we rarely create with that level of completeness. We finish things, good enough, always aware we could improve them, but choosing not to invest the time. We ship and move on, but notice what this costs. We rarely experience the satisfaction of work done completely, of bringing something to such a level of refinement that we can stand behind it fully, proudly, without reservation. The medieval master's signature, his mark, was a statement. I did this to the absolute best of my ability. I focused completely. I held nothing back. This represents my highest standard. That kind of focus creates different quality work than good enough for now. Focus. There's a powerful motivating force in knowing your work will outlast you. Medieval craftsmen created objects meant to last centuries. Modern consumer culture creates objects meant to last years, sometimes months. But your most important work, the ideas you contribute, the things you create, the impact you have, that work can last. The question is, are you creating it with the focus it deserves? The master's signature principle applies, even to work that won't carry your literal name. You know, your standard matters, regardless of external recognition. There's a story about a medieval manuscript illuminator who, when asked why he spent so much time on details in the margins that readers might never notice, replied, "God notices. Whether or not you share that theological framework, the principle stands. There's a standard beyond external judgment." Your own knowledge of whether you brought full focus, whether you did your best, whether the work received the attention it deserved. This internal standard is actually more demanding than external judgment. Others might not notice if you cut corners. You always know. Medieval craftsmen developed something we've largely lost: internal standards, so high that external recognition became almost irrelevant. The work was excellent because anything less violated their sense of self. How might you cultivate this quality of focus? First, choose some work, perhaps not everything, but select pieces to bring to true completion. Not good enough, but represents my best. This means resisting the pressure to ship quickly. It means additional hours of refinement after most people would have stopped. It means the focus that produces mastery rather than mere competence. Second, develop personal standards independent of external metrics. What does excellent mean to you, regardless of what clients, bosses, or audiences might accept? The medieval craftsman's standards came from the craft itself, from tradition, from guild expectations. Your standards might come from studying the best work in your field, from mentors, from your own evolving sense of quality. Third, imagine your work outlasting you, even if it literally won't. Thinking in these terms changes your focus. If this were the piece you'd be judged by in 100 years, would you approach it differently? Fourth, leave your mark. Maybe not literally, but energetically. Work in a way where your signature, your particular attention to detail, your specific care, your unique standards, is evident even if your name isn't attached. The medieval master who carved perfect details on cathedral stones, no one would see wasn't wasting time. He was maintaining the focus that made excellence possible. The moment you accept less than best on hidden work is the moment your standards begin eroding everywhere. Your focus is your signature. The attention you bring to work, all work, seen and unseen, celebrated and anonymous, is your statement about who you are. Medieval masters knew you can't focus brilliantly on important work if you focus carelessly on everything else. Standards are indivisible, so bring your full focus. Sign your work, invisibly if necessary, with the mark of complete attention. Then move forward knowing you did your best. The work received what it deserved. Your reputation, the one that matters most, your reputation with yourself, remains intact. Chapter 10. The Eternal Return. Focus as daily practice, not distant goal. We've journeyed through 9 chapters exploring medieval approaches to focus: the monastery bell, the scriptorium single tasking, the craftsman's embodied mastery, cathedral building across generations, the enclosed garden's boundaries, the illuminated margins constraints, the pilgrim's rhythmic movement, the feast and fast cycles, the master's signature of excellence. Now we arrive at the final insight, perhaps the most important. Focus is not a destination you reach, but a practice you return to. Medieval life was cyclical. The same prayers repeated daily, the same work seasons recurring annually, the same techniques practiced year after year. This repetition wasn't boring, it was deepening. Each time the monk returned to morning prayers, he brought slightly more experience, slightly deeper understanding. Each time the craftsman practiced the basic techniques, his mastery grew. Each season's harvest built on the previous season's lessons. Modern culture is obsessed with progress, with always moving forward to something new. We treat repetition as failure. If you're doing the same thing again, you haven't advanced. But medieval wisdom understood depth comes through return. Mastery comes through repetition with awareness. Focus strengthens through daily practice, not through one-time achievement. Think about the practices we've explored. None of them work as one-time efforts. Creating boundaries around your focus isn't something you do once. It's something you must maintain daily. Single tasking isn't a technique you master and forget. It's a choice you make moment by moment. The rhythm of intensity And rest isn't a schedule you set and forget. It's a pattern you must consciously maintain. This might seem exhausting. Doesn't it mean constant vigilance, endless effort? Actually, the opposite. Medieval practitioners found that daily return to practice eventually becomes natural. The monk didn't have to force himself to wake at the bell after years of practice. His body anticipated it. The craftsman didn't have to consciously remember proper technique. His hands knew. Focus becomes easier through repetition, not harder. The path you walk daily becomes worn smooth. But there's an important nuance. This isn't mindless repetition. It's repetition with awareness. Each time you return to your focus practice, you bring everything you've learned since the last time. The medieval monk saying his 1000th morning prayer wasn't just mechanically repeating words. He was bringing his accumulated understanding, his recent experiences, his current state of heart and mind. The prayer was the same. The person praying was different. Your focus practice works similarly. You might create boundaries around your work time every day, but each day's practice is informed by yesterday's experience. You're not starting over. You're continuing, deepening, refining. This has profound implications for how we think about failure and success with focus. In the achievement mindset, losing focus means failure. You've broken your streak. You have to start over. In the practice mindset, losing focus is simply information. Notice what distracted you. Return to practice. Continue learning. Medieval craftsmen understood that mistakes were part of mastery. The apprentice who never failed wasn't pushing hard enough. Failure meant you were working at the edge of your competence, which is exactly where growth happens. Your focus practice is the same. Days when concentration comes easily don't teach you much. Days when you struggle, lose focus, get distracted. Those are the days you learn. Those are the days that strengthen your practice. If you observe carefully and return without self-judgment. The eternal return principle also addresses the modern problem of burnout. We push hard until we break. Then we have to rebuild from zero. It's an exhausting cycle. Medieval practitioners had a different pattern. Return daily to sustainable practice. Never push so hard you can't return tomorrow. Focus intensely during appropriate hours, then release completely. Tomorrow, return and practice again. This creates sustainability. You're not trying to achieve perfect focus and maintain it forever. You're practicing today, returning tomorrow, continuing indefinitely. There's deep wisdom in the word practice itself. We practice music. We practice meditation. We practice a sport. Practice implies repetition, implies ongoing engagement, implies that mastery is a direction, not a destination. Medieval masters were always practicing. A mason with 40 years of experience still approached each stone as practice. A scribe who'd copied hundreds of manuscripts still approached each page as practice. They never stopped learning because they never treated their craft as finished. There was always deeper focus possible, always greater mastery ahead. This should be liberating for you. You don't have to achieve perfect focus and maintain it. You don't have to master these techniques completely. You simply have to practice. Today, practice creating boundaries. Tomorrow, return to the practice. Some days it will be easier, some days harder. Both are part of the practice. Today, practice single tasking. Tomorrow, return to the practice. Sometimes you'll maintain beautiful focus. Sometimes you'll fragment into distraction. Both inform the practice. The medieval masters had a phrase, ora et labora, pray and work. But they also could have said, practice and return. Practice and return. Practice and return. This is how focus becomes not a struggle, but a way of life. Not a destination you strain toward, but a practice you inhabit. As we conclude this journey through medieval wisdom, here's what I hope you'll carry forward. Focus isn't about superhuman discipline. It's about creating structures, like monastery bells and enclosed gardens, that make concentration natural. Focus isn't about constant intensity. It's about rhythms, like feast and fast, that create sustainability. Focus isn't about perfection. It's about practice, returning daily to techniques that deepen over time. The medieval masters weren't focused because they were superior humans. They were focused because they built their lives, their environments, their daily practices around principles that supported deep attention. You can do the same, not by recreating medieval life, that world is gone, but by extracting the timeless principles and applying them to your modern context. Create your bells, define your boundaries, honor your rhythms, practice your craft, sign your work with excellence, and when you lose focus, because you will, simply return to the practice. The medieval masters are waiting to teach you, not through their words, which are mostly lost to history, but through their work, which remains. Through cathedrals that took generations to build, through manuscripts that still glow with color centuries later, through techniques that still work. Their gift to you is this: focus is possible. Sustained, deep, meaningful focus is possible, not through modern productivity hacks, but through ancient wisdom about how humans actually thrive. Take the gift, return to the practice. Build your focus like building a cathedral, one stone at a time, with care, with patience, with the confidence that what you're creating will outlast you. The work awaits. The practice begins again, and again, and again. This is the medieval art of focus, the eternal return to what matters most. Thank you for walking this path through medieval wisdom. May you find focus in your work, depth in your practice, and satisfaction in the daily return to what you're building. The cathedral of your life is being constructed one focused day at a time. Build well.